And I am live, and Candy is right on cue. Gordon Causey is. This is, if you've been on the station before, you know who this is. Candy the Wonder Dog, who wants her TREAT the way I start out all my videos. So before I get clawed to pawed to death, shit. All right, come on up. Candy has her treat, and I'm ready to start the live stream, starting the show, whatever you want to call it. Got my coffee here. I notice I'm playing solo. I've taken a night or two off, a little worn out, post-election blues, you might call it. Not happy with the results, obviously, if anyone's paid attention to my content, even though I I won't say I predicted it, but I had it on my radar. I was one of the voices saying, and you can check back my videos. I was just rewatching the video I did prior to Mark Carney being coronated, my podcast with a friend of mine, Jacques Lapierre, who was going to be coming on the on a live stream with me, and then we had some technical issues and we weren't able to get it off the ground. But Jack and I talked back in, I believe it was February, and he was predicting at that time 200 plus seats for the Pierre Poilievre led Conservatives. I was I pushed back a bit on him. I said I can envision a scenario where the Conservatives are knocked down to minority, or maybe even the Liberals climb into minority territory themselves. And Jack said, let's do another podcast after the election, and hopefully we'll be able to get one off the ground at some point in the coming days. If not this week, then next week. He's a great guy, fantastic guy. Was down at the Ottawa Trucker Convoy protest pretty much close to every single day, and providing live streams on Facebook and allowing those dialed into him to see what was really happening. And then you could juxtapose that against the grotesque propaganda being spewed forth by the mainstream media. Uh, Notice that there's some people watching now. Let me make sure I put it on live chat. Got a quite a laundry list of things going on right now. I want to talk about primarily about separation, about Quebec and Alberta and the prospect for those two provinces to leave Canada. But before I get on to that, the breaking news today is that, and I don't have the specifics, but I do know the generalities. There is an individual, a sitting member of parliament, who won in the 2025 election from a jurisdiction in Alberta, from an electoral district or riding, if you prefer. And he has agreed to step down. He's agreed to resign his seat in order to allow Pierre Poilievre to enter the House of Commons. Now, a vote still has to take place. There has to be a by-election. However, the Conservatives won this riding with 82% of the vote. So I cannot imagine any possible situation where Pierre Poilievre does not win. Though my forecasting skills are not the great, are not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, because prior to the election taking place this past Monday, I did not envision Pierre Poilievre losing his own riding. With that being said, I've looked at it closer. I never looked into any of the claims. I thought I just shunted it off to, this is wishful thinking on the part of Pierre Poilievre's opponents. But having had some time to ruminate on it, think on it, number one, Poilievre won 7 consecutive elections in that riding, in a riding that by all rights should be liberal. A conservative in Ottawa is like a hockey player in Cuba. It just it's he's out of place in Ottawa. So how was he able to win 7 elections in that riding? Well, I believe I have at least part of the reason why he lost. part of the reason I believe has to do with the fact that all those previous elections, he was not the party leader. So he was in the riding, he was campaigning, he was the one going door to door, he was the one doing backyard barbecues, he was the one shaking hands with constituents, and they got to meet him firsthand. And 4 years, 3.5, 4 years is a long time. There are a lot of people who've forgotten what Pierre is like. They've forgotten, or they're new voters. They didn't vote. They've never met him. They don't really have any concept of him beyond what they see on the nightly news. Max Power has shown up, wishing everyone a happy Friday. I'm doing well. Worked a long shift today. I work. Oh boy, do I work. I'm getting old. My right knee in particular, I tore the meniscus in it a number of years back playing tennis, and it's never 100% fully recovered. And even though my weight is pretty darn good, maybe I need to lose another 10 and get myself south of 200. I'm like 5'11" and a half, almost 6 foot, 5'11" and a bit. And I weigh somewhere in around 210, 215, somewhere in that neighborhood, which isn't bad. I carry it well, but maybe I need to get down to 195. I don't think I can do much better than that. I'm kind of big boned. Anyway, so in this election, in this 2025 election, now Pierre Poilievre, obviously as the leader, he's flying from one end of the country to the other. He's trying to win seats across the country. He's trying to win seats in the GTA that traditionally go to the Liberals or the NDP. And he did remarkably well in expanding the footprint of the Conservative Party in Ontario, especially in the GTA. And I think the number is 10 seats. He gained 10 seats in Ontario, but lost his own. The net gain was 10. If he had held on to his riding, it would have been 11. But in order to win, for a Conservative to win that Carleton, Ottawa area riding, I think you need a candidate who is engaging, smart, personable, which I think Pierre Poilievre is all these things. If you meet him one-on-one. I can't say that definitively. I have not met the man, but it's just the impression I get. The thing with public figures is there is a public persona and then a personal persona. And all the party leaders, Mark Carney, Jagmeet Singh, Pierre Poilievre, and anyone else, Yves-François Blanchet, and anyone else, they have image consultants, they have handlers, they have people telling them what they need to project, what people like, what people don't like. I've had JCB show up as well. Greetings, and Danny, as always, with the praying hands, the cross, and Danny has his coffee, as do I. And I don't think Pierre Poilievre, I think, likely does incredibly well one-on-one personally. He's got a compelling story that is kind of, it doesn't translate well into his public persona. His public persona is very much intellectually sharp, very focused, laser beam on the issues, not very personable, very cold and acerbic, and so, and that can put people off. But then you look beyond that and you say, here's a man who was adopted, who, has whose wife is from Venezuela. I believe it's Venezuela. He has a child who's nonverbal. These are all things that would score very well on the personability scale. For I don't even know if that's a word, but I'm going to use it. He's a very personable guy, but he doesn't use it. It's almost, I get the impression, and this is just my own impression, that Pierre Poilievre believes that that should be divorced, so we should be talking about just the issues. However, I'm sure his handlers and his backroom boys are saying, look, Pierre, you need to inject more of that wonderful character you have, that personal side, talk about your wife, talk about your daughter being nonverbal. These are things that will connect with voters. And the impression I have is that Pierre, almost said Peter, is, reticent, not completely, but reticent. He'd rather just talk about the issues. And that is something I respect. Again, in terms of him losing that Carleton area riding, there are a lot of people living in the Ottawa area and in his riding of Carleton, his former riding, who did not like his support of the trucker convoy. People had been propagandized into an irrational state of fear where the capacity for critical thinking goes away. They're just terrified. And Hong Kong, oh my God. And here's Pierre Poilievre, and he was the most prominent federal politician, the most prominent. He wasn't the only federal politician siding with the truckers or speaking up for the truckers, speaking positively about the truckers and the protesters. He wasn't the only one, but he was the most prominent. And this is, I'm not sure exactly when he ascended to the leadership. I don't believe he was the leader yet in February of 2022, because the election we had was in 2021. Aaron O'Toole led the party to a third consecutive defeat. First, they lost under Harper, then under Andrew Scheer, and then under Aaron O'Toole. And so I don't think he had yet ascended to the leadership, but I think everyone knew he was the heir apparent. Let me read what's being written. So we've got Max Power saying, good evening to everyone. Airworks is writing, I don't understand how Pierre can go to Alberta since they want to separate. It's the safest seat. Alberta, Saskatchewan are the two safest conservative areas in Canada. And Mark Carney, when he picked the riding he wanted to run in, apparently he has a residence in Rideau, right near the Governor General's, but he decided to run in something of a suburb called Nepean. It's kind of like Scarborough to Toronto or Etobicoke to Toronto. He decided to run in Nepean because he wanted a safe seat. Pierre Poilievre went into hostile territory when he entered the House 20 odd years ago, when he was a very young man. And he went into hostile territory. And the way I imagine he was able to win as a conservative in what should be a liberal riding is because he was able to work tirelessly at meeting people, talking to them, engaging with them, and people got to know him. But again, 3, 4 years, long time between elections. You get all kinds of new voters. There are new people moving into the riding. There are people who've forgotten what their encounter with Pierre. And so now he's going to be going out to Alberta. I will Airworks be getting on to separation. And it's an interesting topic. But before I do, I just wanted to say that um, I saw a YouTube video put out by CTV, and I'd like to, and I didn't, well, I saved it to watch later, just a 3, 4 minute clip talking about Pierre Poilievre trying to hang on to, to the conservative leadership, trying to just hang on. And they're framing it in a way to suggest that Pierre Poilievre is in serious danger of losing the leadership of the Conservative Party and that he's seeking ways to hang on. And why are they framing it in that context when every leading voice from the Conservative Party has endorsed him, has said he should stay on? He has said he is going to be staying on. Why are they doing this? Because Pierre Poilievre, if you work for CBC, CTV Global, if you work for any of the mainstream legacy media outlets, Pierre Poilievre, with his pledge to defund the CBC and to end the taxpayer funded subsidy of legacy media outlets, he is enemy number one. They do not want Pierre Poilievre. They would just as soon see his political career fade to black. If you're working for CTV or Global, your salary if you're a journalist with either, and I use that term journalist loosely, if you're a journalist with CBC TV or Global, your salary is subsidized by Canadian taxpayers to the tune of about $30,000 a year. Wouldn't it be nice if all Canadian employees, regardless of their profession, if the federal government would uh, provide a subsidy to employers for $30,000 a year? Think of people working jobs like I'm working right now. Because he's such, but I do not have the same capacity to influence people's thoughts, views, and opinions as someone with CTV who has a national platform, is on the nightly news. And so they want Pierre Poilievre gone. He is a threat to them. Now, as much as it pains me, I am going to give credit to Mark Carney. He has indicated that there will be no games, that he will call a very quick by-election for this vacated seat. It'll be interesting to see, do the Liberals and NDP even bother running a candidate? There have been times in the past where opposing political parties have stood down and basically allowed someone to enter the House. I can't think of many specific examples, but I know it has happened. It might have happened with John Turner, might have happened with Brian Mulroney, where it's almost like a gentleman's agreement. Honor among thieves. All right, we're not going to run against you. We'll give you the easiest possible path. It doesn't matter what happens. That riding in Alberta, I'm convinced, is impossible for the Liberals to win. So let's just we still have to wait and see when that is going to happen. We have to wait to see exactly what day the House of Commons will reconvene, when Mark Carney's cabinet will be sworn in. He does not have to be sworn in because he remains prime minister. Um, so Max is writing, I saw a poll that said about 25% of Albertans want to separate. I believe the Clarity Act requires a clear majority. That number could go up, though, if Carney screws up the economy in Alberta. If Carney will not allow, does not show some leadership in terms of this Bill C-69, either scrapping it or amending it to make it possible for energy infrastructure projects to get off the ground, that number could grow. That number could absolutely grow. But we shall see. We have had two sovereignty referendums in this country already. I forget the year of the first one. It was 1980 or 81, maybe 82. That was the first one with René Lévesque, who was leading the Parti Québécois at the time. That one was defeated quite handily. I don't even think the separatists, they were in and around 40%. Who wanted to separate. It was in around 60% who voted against it. The following referendum, which took place in and around 1992, that one was razor thin. It was 49 point something percent voting in favor of separating, and only 50 point something percent voting against it. It came very, very close. I think it was Airworks was writing, no, Max was writing about this poll. No, someone wrote about the Clarity Act. And the Clarity Act, there needs to, but what is a clear majority? That's kind of a fuzzy thing. Is that 50% plus one? Is that a clear majority? We'll see what happens. Airworks says Daniel is in the process of changing the rules in terms of how many people it takes to separate. No, Airworks, allow me. What she has changed is she has lowered the threshold at which the number of signatures you need on a petition to bring something like a referendum forward. It used to be a certain percentage, and I forget if it's 10%. I think 10% of all eligible voters needed to sign a petition in order to bring it forward for something like a referendum. Now, what they have done is, in order to bring that forward, you need 10% of all the people who actually voted. So you might have, 2 million eligible voters, but not 2 million people won't vote. Not everyone who is eligible votes. Might be 65, might be 70%, whatever it is. And so instead of having to get 10%, and I may not have the percentage right, but instead of having to get a certain percentage of the total number of registered voters, now you only need 10% or whatever it is of the people who actually voted. So that lowers the threshold of the number of signatures. And there's a group, at least an individual or a group, who is they're proposing that Alberta separate, and they now say that they have the number of signatures needed to bring it forward as and lead or Quebec, Alberta, into having an actual sovereignty referendum. Let's see what is being written. Danny says, I feel Maxime was far more prominent than Pierre during convoy. I agree that he was, and he was both feed in, but Maxime Bernier doesn't get the same coverage that Pierre Poilievre got. The only you would not see Maxime Bernier being interviewed on CBC CTV Global, but that would happen with Pierre Poilievre because he was a prominent figure within the opposition Conservative Party and touted to be the next leader of the party. So he was given a bigger platform than by the mainstream media than Maxime Bernier. I agree with you. Uh, but Pierre Poilievre is, in my mind, far more prominent and individual, broad spectrum. If you went around Canada right now, into any town or city in Canada, BC, right through to the Maritimes, and you asked 100 people in every town, do you know who Pierre Poilievre is? And they would all say, 98% of them would say yes. And then if you ask them, do you know who Maxime Bernier is? I imagine the number that would recognize the name would go down. It'd still be reasonably high, but it wouldn't approach Poilievre's. Airworks says, yes, I understand that is a very safe seat, but what happens when Alberta separates? Quebec or Quebec, I keep confusing Quebec and Alberta because of this separation issue. No, obviously he couldn't be PM as a sitting member but in terms of how long would it take? It would take a while. It would take a while. First, a referendum has to be approved, and then a date for the vote has to be set. And then there is campaigning, and then the actual vote takes place. And then let's say that Alberta votes to separate from Canada, then negotiations have to take place. Alberta would be told, all right, we have $1 trillion accumulated federal deficit. You guys are responsible for a proportional, you represent whatever percent of the population, 11, 12, 15%, whatever it is. It's about 6 million people out of our 40. So it'd be somewhere in the 10 to 15% range. Well, you're responsible for 10 to 15% of the accumulated federal debt. And then Alberta would turn around and they would say, okay, fair enough. But we also have a stake in 10 to that same percentage. We have a stake in all the federal assets, all the embassies that are held, they're 10, are the Canadian embassy in Tokyo, Japan has to be worth a pretty penny. Well, we get 10 to 15% of that. And this is where things get dicey, is in the negotiation. And ultimately, I do not think that Alberta all on its own could survive as a viable country on the North American landscape. I think they would be forced to join the United States of America to become that vaunted 51st state. Their prospects for being a viable nation improve exponentially if they can add Saskatchewan and, more importantly, BC. And that's not to say that Saskatchewan isn't important. It is. They have natural resources en masse as well. However, BC has ports. BC has shipping. It has the ability to get things like canola oil or potash or liquefied natural gas. That's how they get it to market. And so being landlocked is bad. The way they could circumvent being landlocked is to join the United States, and the United States then would have a vested interest in getting Alberta resources and products to international markets. Right now, the Americans are able to buy Albertan oil and natural gas at a discount to the world price because they're the only customer. I keep using the analogy of that painting back there that cost me $125 because I bought it in an auction and it was competitive. There were a few people liked it and were bidding on it. I kind of said, I forget exactly, but I gave myself, I said, okay, I'll go 140 or 150, no higher, whatever. I forget what dollar figure I put on it. And I paid 125. If I'd been the only one bidding on it, I could have had it for $2. And that's the case. That's the situation Alberta is in when they're trying to sell their oil and natural gas. The only customer they have is the United States. And so the US says, fine, we'll buy it, but we're getting it at a discount to the world price. And well, that stinks. You need to pay the world price. All right, fine. We won't buy it. Sell it to someone else. You're our only customer. You're the only ones we can get it to. We don't have pipelines going anywhere. And everything that has to, what oil and I don't know that I imagine you can ship natural gas by tanker truck. You can liquefy it and put it into a pressurized container car, maybe. I don't know. Uh, but pipelines are the preferred and the economical way to move oil and natural gas, liquefied natural gas, and get it onto ships and then send it to Korea, to Japan, send it across the Atlantic to the Europeans, Western Europeans who are tired of having to buy Vladimir Putin's oil and gas because all they're doing is funding his war against Ukraine. And depending on how you feel about that war, but if Vladimir Putin wouldn't have the financial resources to prosecute that war if it wasn't for the fact that he basically, the Europeans are stuck. They have to buy from him because we can't sell them ours because guys like Mark Carney, and hopefully he changes his mind, won't allow our products to get to international markets. Um, let's read what's being written. Max is saying, my understanding is she reduced the number of people needed to initiate a referendum. Yeah. But once initiated, a clear majority is still needed on that referendum to actually separate. True. Well, let's not put the cart too far in front of the horse. One, there has to be a referendum. Two, they got to decide on what the question is. This was, when we talk about Quebec separation, that was a big thing in the first referendum, 1981, 1982. The question was like 4 or 5 sentences long. It was the biggest run-on sentence. Whereas you agree that the province of Quebec has the right to negotiate an economic association with political sovereignty from the rest of it, and it went on and on and on. The second question the question they asked in the subsequent referendum in around 1992 was far more clear, far less ambiguous. But that first one was just, it was like, we get to have our cake and eat it too. We'll have an economic union with Canada, but we'll be a separate country. Sovereignty association is what they called it. We're sovereign, but we're associated. And Quebecers rejected it. Let's see what's being written. A lot of things. OJ Malik, haven't seen you for a bit. Uh, and then I have Max. Oh, where are we? Um, and he's talking about the fact that Maxime Bernier was arrested many times during COVID. Yeah, I remember the video of him getting handcuffed. I think it was out in Manitoba and during convoy. Uh, Danes asked for the address for a video. Max is saying, "You're welcome. I think repealing Bill 69 would help Canadian unity a lot. So would building a cross-country pipeline, which three-quarters of Canadians support, but the province of Quebec does not." And now we can get on to Quebec separation. And the fact that for the better part of the past year, the Parti Québécois, separatist Parti Québécois, led by a young man by the name of Plamondon. I forget he's got a hyphenated first name, like Yves-François Blanchet. The Plamondon has a hyphenated name, and I forget what it is. But he's a young guy, very sharp, very quick on his feet. And he has the Parti Québécois to this day. They are leading in the polls, and they have made it a central plank in their platform that electing them to government means that we will be having another referendum during their next term. There isn't slated to be an election in Quebec until 2026, and Plamondon is talking about having a referendum before the year 2030. Man, oh man. And the province of Quebec, the idea of a pipeline politically, none of the parties support it. Not the Parti Québécois, not the Bloc Québécois, not the CAQ, not François Legault. They're all opposed to building a pipeline through Quebec. This pipeline called this proposed pipeline called Energy East. They are opposed to it. And fair enough. Okay, fine. What does that mean? We can only get the oil and liquefied natural gas as far as Ontario. Then there are ways to work around it. You can put it onto ships, onto lakers that would then have to transfer it onto ocean liners. That might not be economically feasible. Another way is you go up into James Bay into a port, and then, but again, that makes the shipping routes are far longer when you have to navigate through James Bay, the Hudson's Bay, up into the high Arctic, and then across the ocean. It would be far easier if they could get to Halifax or a port city on the East Coast. But maybe there are ways to work around the fact that Quebec doesn't want to have a pipeline. But man, oh man, if Alberta separates, I think the only way it becomes economically viable for Alberta if they separate on their own, and even if they join with Saskatchewan, the only way that works is if they join the United States and become that 51st state. But that's putting the cart way in front of the horse. Um, what would happen in the event of a referendum in 1970? I forget what year. It was like 1976 was when the Parti Québécois first got. Well, actually, it was earlier than that. The Parti Québécois. It's been a while since I've been down this road reading. I've read extensively on it, but not for a long time. And the Parti Québécois kept coming up short against the Liberal Party until they dropped sovereignty from their platform. They had always been saying that a referendum on sovereignty was part of the platform, and then they took it out and they got elected. And what they wanted to prove was we can govern and we can govern well. And they got elected and they did. They governed well. The books were balanced, people were happy. Things were running okay, not perfect, nothing ever is, but people were happy, and then they got elected again. And with this second election, that they promised a referendum. And what happened? They introduced a piece of legislation called Bill 101, and it was a bill designed to protect the French language from the incursion of English. Um, if you had a sign of a store and you wanted to have a bilingual sign, Bob's clothing store, Vêtements de Bob or whatever it would be, had to be the letters had to be twice as big in French as they were in English, twice as big, twice as prominent. They created the Bureau de la Langue Française, the official office of the French language that would go around to offices that had light switches that said on and off, and they had little decals, and they'd cover up on and off and put ouvert, fermé, because that's what you say in French. You say open the lights, close the lights. Ouvre, ferme, would put on stickers over on and off, and they went crazy with this stuff and promised a referendum. And the bill was called Bill 101. And in the media, it got called Bill 401 because what resulted was lots of Anglo-Quebecers jumped on to Highway 2040 and went to Ontario, where they merged with the 401 and they came to Toronto. All the major banks, Bank of Montreal, Bank of Nova Scotia, Bank of Commerce, all the banks had their head offices in Montreal. It was the corporate capital of Canada up until this time. And in around 1975, 1976, right in that window, all the major banks started to move, and all major Canadian companies began to move down. Toronto was kind of the second sister. We weren't. Toronto wasn't the big corporate center of Canada that it is today. It was a more provincial city. Montreal was the main corporate center of Canada. It was our New York until René Lévesque got in and got a majority government, promised a referendum, and then everyone started to come. Would that happen with Alberta? And I think that's also very likely. There'd be a lot of people worried, not wanting to live in what about my Canada pension plan? What about this? What about that? And they would leave and seek to come to other places in Canada, primarily, I imagine, Ontario. So it's a messy situation. The status quo is always preferable. We'll see. I'm just going to read what is being written. Getting back to Pierre Poilievre, Danny is saying that the MSM is anti-Poilievre. Absolutely. Does he have an accent in his name, Poilievre? I would think there'd be an accent grave over the second E. I think that's how you've written it, but I don't think I've ever seen it. When you read Jean Chrétien's name, there's an accent aigu over the first D in Chrétien. And you would often see that even by English people would, out of respect to the French language, but I've never seen Poilievre's name written with an accent. Airworks is saying, I don't trust Carney to repeal Bill C-69. Sadly, he wouldn't necessarily, the best case would be to simply repeal it, but he could also amend it. And I don't think he'll do either. And he's quoting again from Ephesians about, and this is ultimately very important because everything that's going on, Danny has forwarded on to me a video which somewhat echoes a thesis statement I've been making for the better part of 2 years, talking about Agenda 2030, Great Reset, Club of Rome, all these groups, WEF, and their desire to reshape the global order and to replace current systems with a one world type government. And how would you bring about such a radical fundamental change to the way the world governs itself? Well, you need a crisis. If there isn't a crisis, things kind of muddle along. We'll figure it out. But when there's a crisis, everything's on the table. And it's been something of a thesis statement of mine that I'm expecting in the months, years ahead for people all around the world to be confronted, and especially in the Western developed world, to be hit by so many crises, multiple crises, maybe a health crisis, war, famine, supply chain issues, cyber attacks, climate crises. And what my anticipation is that we'll be hit in so many different ways all at the same time. We could be in trouble. I'm going to, let's go. Okay. My connection wasn't stable, but now it's stable. And so what Danny is writing, and when that happens, your feet better be planted firm on something not of this crazy, mixed up, shaking, the ground is shaking beneath our feet. You need to have your feet on something more solid than the shaking ground. And that which we need to place our feet firmly planted on is the rock of our salvation. And I'm talking about Jesus Christ, because that is the only way we are going to be able to navigate and see clearly through everything that's going to be coming at us. That's what I expect. This is my belief, core central belief. There's going to be so many things coming at us that if you are not resting solidly on the word of God and getting into a relationship with his son, Jesus Christ, you're not going to be able to navigate the times that are coming. I should share the video. Danny, maybe you can put it in the link here. It just, someone talking about the UN proclamation that just went through with only 7 of 193 UN member nation states. Only 7 didn't endorse it. All the rest did. 800 and 180, whatever. 193. My math skills have gone out the window. I'm too tired. So let me see. Danny's saying with Carney at the helm, we can kiss away all our gun and hunting rights. And Koj Malik says yes. And I don't know what that is in reference to. Koj Malik is in the United States. She's down in Florida. Danny's writing, last I saw, Alberta had over 192,000 signatures a few days ago. Will there be a referendum? I would like to see them give Carney at least the benefit of the doubt and give him a chance. Yeah. He was sucking and blowing during the election campaign, talking about getting Alberta's resources to market, but then he'd go to Quebec and say, no, we're not going to, you can veto pipelines. And are you in favor of pipelines? Are you against pipelines? It's hard to say. And we'll find out. The government, once the parliament reconvenes, there will be something called a throne speech. And it's where the government, which is led by Mark Carney, will lay out its vision for the coming parliamentary session. And let's see what does he have to say? What is the Liberal government going to promise? So far, all they've been promising is doom and gloom. They've been promising crisis. They've been promising, the Horizons Canada, directly attached to the Prime Minister's office, a government agency, is talking about Canadians in the years ahead needing to forage for food. Max is writing that the mainstream should be doing more to report the fact that federal court found the Emergency Act invocation violated the charter and that it was illegal and there was no emergency that justified it. Yeah, but what are the ramifications? None. None. They said it was illegal, but there's no consequence. And that's what's crazy. And Max saying that Pierre did nothing wrong by being there. No, he didn't. However, you're talking about facts, and when you talk about facts versus feelings, feelings matter more than facts. That is simply reality. The people were scared. I have family in the Ottawa area, and they were angry, emotionally upset at the trucker convoy. They were emotionally engaged, And they bought in totally to the framing of that protest as an illegal occupation. And so, they got to go away. This is their, yeah. And the main driver of their fear was the fact that they didn't like the fact that so many people were gathering in close proximity. And they thought, oh my gosh, it's going to be a super spreader. They're going to kill somebody because they're breathing together. The level of fear that some had, and a very small percentage of people still have. You still see people, not very many. I'd put it down to like 1% now, who still go out with a mask on, but they are out there anyway. Um, Max is writing also, there was a CTV News article saying that Trudeau himself now regrets his fringe remarks on the convoy, which were divisive and made things worse. Trudeau, I don't believe anything he has to say, at all, at all. The only reason he makes any statement is because of political expediency. He's trying to score points somewhere. Maybe you should dial that back and say you regret having said that. Oh, okay, you think so? Uh, and Airworks is saying a little too late, and I don't believe me neither. He was horrible. He was horrible to anyone, regardless of political stripe, anyone who wanted simple bodily autonomy, who didn't want. I was having a conversation with a guy today and talking about the fact that he said that he used to work in a retail environment similar to what I'm working right now. And he moved from Brampton, moved to our little town, and he said it's nice and quiet, and I like it here. And he said, but I haven't worked now for 2, 3 years. And I said, well, I stopped working for the army. I left the army. I released in June of 2021 because I wouldn't get the job. I wasn't willing to take that shot. And I know this guy was gay, and I don't care. I just put that out there because he pointed out his partner. So that's my partner over there. Okay, whatever. And one thing I do know is that homosexuals were extremely the rate of vaccination amongst homosexuals, and they did stats on it in the United States, and they were 98% likely to roll up their sleeves and get the jabs. We all saw that pride group, male vocal group singing vaccinate, vaccinate, make an appointment, vaccinate, vaccinate, gets rid of COVID. And they were allowed to, that was on NBC Nightly News, these guys singing a song that openly spread disinformation. The vaccine gets rid of COVID. No, it doesn't. That's a lie. Misinformation, disinformation, spreading out, propaganda. Anyway, Airworks is now writing. So Alberta joins the US. Then what happens when Trump is gone and a liberal gets into the White House? Things are in such incredible flux right now. Nothing, the future as we know it is very much, how do you plan for the future when you're not sure that the structures that have been in place for decades and centuries, they may not be in play in another 4 or 5 years. By the time 2030 comes around, the old conventions, the old norms, our old structures may have been completely turned upside down. Who's to know? Max, and remember, Donald Trump is now openly talking about serving another term. And he is. It's out there from everyone, from the Fox News to the MSNBC. Everyone's talking about the fact that Trump has openly mused about potentially serving a third term. It would require a constitutional amendment or an amendment to the amendment. But hey, if you got liberals in the US who want the Second Amendment changed, the right to bear arms, they want that amended. Well, if you can change that amendment, well, then you can change the one about term limits, about the president being limited to 2 terms, which interestingly, there was that limit did not come into place until I think the 1950s, after FDR, after Franklin Delano Roosevelt had been elected president of the United States 4 times. 4. Airworks is writing, I have heard many bad things from people who have read that book. I am frightened for the future of Canada. I had so much hope, and now I'm very down. Try not to be. And the way you can find peace, uh, comfort, and even joy in these troubling times with the storm clouds on the horizon is this book. I got to do another faith-based podcast soon, talking about you know victory in Christ at Calvary. It's where I found victory. At Calvary, I won. Years I spent in vanity and pride, knowing not it was for me he died. No, years I spent in vanity and pride, knowing not my Lord was crucified, knowing not it was for me he died at Calvary. Jesus went to the cross and he rose from the dead. And in that you can find peace, comfort, and immense joy. So, Max is writing. Also, Virginia, I can't pronounce that last name, a victim of Epstein and Maxwell. Oh yes, down in Australia. I read about that. Yeah, uh, a young woman who claimed to have been sexually trafficked by the Epsteins and Maxwells, and I think she was trafficked to. She accused. She said she was trafficked, I believe, to Prince Andrew, who always denied it, but then he paid her a big sum of money, an out of court settlement thing. And she recently died. And you always wonder, same, I personally don't think Jeffrey Epstein died. I think he's still alive. I think someone died in that cell that night when the video cameras conveniently just stopped working. But I don't think it was Jeffrey Epstein. Uh, and Max is saying, we are in God's hands, and I have complete trust that we will all make it through this by the grace of God. And again, this world is temporary. We're going to our eternal home. Uh, and Max reminding everyone to click on the like. Thank you for everyone who's done it already. Airworks is saying Carney said he wanted pipelines of talent, so he isn't going to support actual pipelines. No, I don't suspect he will either. Everything I'm reading about it, or everything I'm hearing about his book, Values, speaks to the fact that he's very much all in on the absolute necessity to get Canada to net zero, for Canada to stop burning fossil fuels, for us to stop driving cars with internal combustible engines. Once it's all on electric, and once you get to this utopian panacea of net zero, as if it's going to change the world, as if climate change is all this, climate will stop changing if Canadians impoverish themselves. But he appears, to my mind, to be all in on this. And so the prospect of exploiting that immense wealth sitting in the ground in Alberta and Saskatchewan, I don't see it in the cards, but I'm willing to wait and see. Will he have a change of heart? I don't think he will, but I don't do tarot cards. I don't have a crystal ball, and my magic 8 ball cracked. Um, Max is writing, Carney's Canada will not be powered by oil or fossil fuels. It will be powered only by pronouns and good vibes. We need to hear the speech from the throne. That's where he'll lay out his course. And we'll see. Why is he allowing Poilievre such an easy entry? Why isn't he putting up any resistance, he has 168 or 169 in a Quebec riding. It's kind of flipping back and forth. It was put in the Liberal column. Then they did a retabulation of the votes because it was so close, and it gave the seat to the Bloc Québécois. Now they're still pending an official recount. And once that recount is done, we'll either know do the Liberals have 168 or 169. I'm here to tell you, it doesn't matter whether it's 168 or 169. Either way, Mark Carney has a clear path forward to pass anything he wants to, because all he needs to do is to wait until there are 3 missing members from the Conservative Bloc and NDP and make sure he has full attendance, or conversely, simply get 3 NDP, 3 Bloc to join in with him, and 3 or 4. And Bob's your uncle, he can pass whatever he wants. I do not think we will be seeing a vote of no confidence. And I like how Max Power with me talking about, the 2 gentlemen I met at my workplace. Not that there's anything wrong with that, where Jerry and George were outed, even though I've been outed. I was never in. They had a conversation and they saw someone listening in, so they were pretending to be homosexual. And it turned out the person they were play acting for ended up being a reporter for New York State University or something, for a journalist student. And so she wrote up an article about George and Jerry being gay. Anyway, and then Max Power says, first, you were a horrible person if you were wearing an N95 because doctors needed it. Then you became evil for not wearing a mask. Then the virus came from a wetland. Now it's from like they keep changing the stories. And new news has just come out from the United States where RFK Jr. is implementing regulations for Health and Human Resources, HHR, that will require any new pharmaceutical products, including what's, that they will have to undergo placebo-based trials. And this is the gold standard. The gold standard of science in my books, and I didn't come up with this on my own, is a double-blind, placebo-controlled trial. Double-blind means you have 1,000 people sign up to take part in an investigation of a new pharmaceutical product. And so you divide them into 2 randomly, randomized, randomized, double-blind, placebo-controlled. So you randomize, you take 500 in one group, 500 in another group. You divide it in 2, and then half are given a placebo or a sugar pill, and the other half are given the actual drug. And neither the person receiving the drug nor the investigators know who's who. So I sign up for this trial. I'm given a number. I'm participant 138 of 1,000. I'm participant 138. And then randomly, I'm assigned to either the drug group or the placebo group. But the only people who know which one I'm in are part of something called a data safety monitoring board. They know, but they are to have absolutely no contact whatsoever with the investigators. It's supposed to be 0 contact between the investigators, meaning the drug companies, and the data safety monitoring board. Any contact, even casual contact between the DSMB and the clinical investigators threatens to nullify the results of the trial, because then bias can enter in. And so I don't know what I've gotten. The investigators don't know who's gotten the drug. I'm taking my pill every day or whatever it is. And then they're monitoring me. They're checking biomarkers, liver enzymes, goodness knows what, platelet count. and seeing how is the placebo group performing against the drug group. And like, let's say the it's a cholesterol drug, like a Lipitor or Crestor, and they're monitoring. And the primary aim of the trial is to determine, does this drug lower cholesterol count, bad cholesterol? I think that's LDL. And so they're monitoring the true groups. And does the dose group, does their cholesterol go down or doesn't it? And that's the way it works. And you need to have an equal number of placebo and you need to have an equal number of dosed. Well, during the COVID trials, what happened? I forget how many people were participating in that trial for Pfizer, but I believe it was in and around 50,000 people were participating, pretty much evenly divided. Placebo was saline solution versus the actual mRNA. But then what happened, just two or so months into the trial, they unblinded it. And then they found out, okay, who got the placebo? And then they said to the people on placebo, do you want the real drug? Do you want to get the mRNA? And the overwhelming majority of them, like 95% plus, said, yeah, give it to me. Give me the mRNA. So that immediately right there destroyed the placebo group. They shredded the placebo group by giving everyone the mRNA. And that means that how do you measure, you know, what's the incidence of heart damage in the dosed arm versus the placebo arm? Well, we can't compare because now we have 52,000 in the mRNA arm and there's only 700 people in the placebo group left. So you can't measure the results anymore. And so then they can honestly make a statement that there's no evidence. There's no evidence of increased levels of heart damage amongst those taking the mRNA versus placebo. There's no evidence of that because we destroyed the evidence by getting rid of the placebo group. So we can't check it. It's ridiculous. And what RFK Jr. has proposed, and I believe it's going through, is that now all pharmaceutical products, including mRNA and like-minded products, that they have to have a placebo control group. I say bravo, but the pharmaceutical industry, you want us to follow the highest gold standard? What about our profits? It'll cost too much money to do trials like this. It's going to be a show. And most people that you're going to talk to are likely going to say that RFK Jr. is horrible for requiring placebo-controlled trials. He's not a scientist. Listen to the pharmaceutical companies. They'll tell us it's like, it's like the tobacco industry. Who knows more about cigarettes and whether they're healthy or not than the tobacco industry? I'm a smoker. Anyway, and Max talking about the MSM and everyone being the ultimate purveyors of misinformation. Um, Max is saying Carney is a very cunning and calculating person. I believe he engineered Trudeau's resignation and he entered the race knowing he wouldn't have to disclose his assets until after the election. Yeah, 60 days from the time he was sworn in as prime minister. He has 60 days, and then he has to give it to the audit ethics commissioner. And then 60 days after that, the ethics commissioner gives it to us. So we're talking about 4 months, give or take a day or two here or there. So he came on board early in March, like March 8th, 9th, 10th, somewhere around there. So April, May, June, in July, when everyone's on vacation, that's when the ethics commissioner will be divulging Mark Carney's assets, and we'll find out. Trunion's here and writing, be careful, they put rat poison in people's burgers thanks to temporary foreign workers. Hadn't heard that. And that's what Sharunian's writing, what I'm saying. But I'm a free speech absolutist, and we'll see what happens in that regard too. There's a fear that biggest fear I have in the coming months is that there's going to be a big clampdown, and you totalitarian states always want to control the flow of information, and even a little pipsqueak voice like mine is a threat, and there are bigger threats. They want everyone singing from the same songbook. They want everyone on the same page. They want only one avenue of information. You're not allowed to question climate change. Climate change is only caused by the burning of fossil fuels. End of story, full stop. You're not allowed to contradict that. You're not allowed to have a contrary opinion. Even if you were chair of meteorological studies at MIT, you're not allowed, you shut up. Say, COVID was just a warm up when guys like Dr. Geert Vanden Bosch, who used to head up conferences, he'd be the keynote speaker at international conferences on vaccinology because he worked at GSK at Novartis, senior development roles in vaccine development. He headed up programs for Gavi, the Global Alliance for Vaccines and Immunizations. He worked at the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, in vaccine development. Like, here's a guy who was top of the profession. And then he did not follow the consensus. He dared to breach the consensus. And he called in early 2021. So we need to stop this mass vaccination. You're going to end up with a new variant that's just going to be, far more. It's going to spread far more far and wide than the old variants did. And McGill University said, "Oh, the doom and gloom scenario of Dr. Geert Vanden Bosch." I read the paper, and he doesn't know what he's talking about. Yes, he's a highly qualified. He's got all the requisite, educational background and industry experience. He's very well qualified to talk about this, but he's completely out to lunch. We're not going to see the emergence of a highly transmissible variant. Relax, people. Then boom, Omicron. Dr. Geert Vanden Bosch was right. Maybe you should have been listening to the man, but he went against the consensus. And if you cannot question it, you've heard it many times. If you cannot question it, it's not science. But science is now, well, it always has been very hyper political. You better go along to get along. If you want the grant money, if you want to be financed, if you want that NHS, National Health Service grant, that's Britain, or I can't remember the NIH, National Institutes of Health. If you want Dr. Fauci to approve your grant for $10 million so that your lab can be well financed for the next 3 or 4 years, you can earn your nice, $300,000-$400,000 a year salary. Well, you better play along, or that money is going to be cut off. Same thing in climate science. If your computer modeled simulation doesn't project a catastrophic scenario in the years ahead, you're not getting a dime. You might as well go and, stuff shells in a grocery store or something. You've got no future in academia anymore because you're bucking the narrative. Not allowed. Uh, Let's see what Max is writing. Sounds like they want to eliminate the control testing group to erase any evidence that they're because that harm is distributed equally to everyone. Follow the money. This is all Max. And then he goes on to say UK already passed their version of an online harms law, and apparently it's really bad, with people getting hit with social media offenses. I don't know. I expect to be hit. And bring it on. I'm not meaning to be unkind to an individual who is suffering from gender confusion. Uh, but at the same time, I'm not going to join their circus. if I'm in an individual interaction with someone who's obviously male, and I know that their name used to be Bob, but they want to be addressed as Loretta, I'll call them Loretta. A name, a name is a name is a name, arose by any other name. I work, I worked. I don't think she works there anymore, but I worked with a woman who professed a male identity. And the name she used was not her birth name, was not the name on her birth certificate, and it was a very androgynous name. And fine, if that's what you want to be called, that's what I'm going to call you. But I'm not going to call you a man because you're not. You're a woman. Anyway, SRCX has shown back up. That's part of your name, SRCX off grid. That's cool. Spent the day fly fishing on a glacier fed river. Fried up a nice 2-pound Arctic grayling on the river bank. Garlic butter, lemon, excellent. Eagles everywhere. Amazing day. Grizzly Adams. That's what I'm going to start calling you. And I'm being asked on my opinions on Mohammed Godrat theory of AI. I'm not familiar with it. I don't know who Mohammed Godad is, and I don't know his theory on AI. And I don't think I have a pen lying around in this heap of stuff on my table. Here we go. There's a pen. And here's a piece of paper. So I will write down Mohammed Godrat. I think it's Gawdat. AI. Haven't heard it. Max saying the UK's United Kingdom's Online Safety Act aims to make the UK the safest place in the world to be online, but by protecting users from bad words, protecting people from being offended. Heard a great comedian talking about the fact that you don't see any more kids going around with casts. It used to be regular, at least a couple times a year when you're in grade 2, 3, 4, maybe even grade 1. Be 2 or 3 times a year, a kid would come in, he'd have a cast doing his Evil Knievel impression on his bicycle, or climbing trees and falling out, or playing sports, whatever. And a kid would have a cast, or they'd break their leg or their arm, and then everyone signed the cast, and they were something of a celebrity. And I used to think, but damn, it'd be fun, to get that much attention from everyone in school. If I had a cast, I just don't want to break my arm to have to do it. And now you don't see. I can't remember the last time I saw a kid in a cast. And because they don't because the way kids get hurt now is they never break bones, and you can't sign a cast on someone's crippling anxiety. That was a comedian talking about, you can't sign a cast they don't cast crippling anxiety. And that's what kids suffer from now. It used to be broken bones. Now my feelings. And then Gordana has shown up. Great show as always. So I'm a little on the tired side. I've been working a lot of hours lately, and so and tonight I worked until 7 o'clock. So, and I'm starting tomorrow at 6 a.m. So I got to get some Z's soon. And SRCX is saying saw a group of Dall sheep up in the high Alpine. We'll have to take a closer look tomorrow. What you should do is you should get a YouTube channel going, just walking around the Yukon. Take your GoPro or whatever it is and, show off the scenery. Max saying, let me tell you folks, Gordon's YouTube channel. Oh, thank you. Oh, yeah. Channeling is trying. Let me tell you, okay, Gordon Cosby, great guy. Okay. He's got a YouTube channel. It's amazing. Gordon likes me. I like people who like me. Okay. Got my up there. Although, yeah, it's depressing because that's pretty what That's close to what my shade of hair would be in the summer when I had it. Should show you a picture here sometime. I have it. Almost something flying. Got two things piled up. Oh yeah, here I am in high school. This is me, I think, in grade 11, 16. That was me. I don't know how well you can see that. Dumbarton High School. And if you look down there, it says Gord Causey goes high through the air, blah blah blah. And that's me there grabbing the rebound. And I actually remember that play specifically because I was the highest scoring player on our team. And I was playing okay, but I was forcing up a few shots, going 1-on-5. And the coach had said, if you force one more shot, I'm going to sit you down. And I'd been playing the whole game. I hadn't sat at all. And so in that, we went down the court and I forced up a shot. And I knew as soon as it left my hand that it wasn't going in. And I went hard after the rebound because I knew I was going to be sitting down. And actually, the coach was getting ready to replace me, but then I grabbed that board, came down, and I was able to put it back, and he didn't. So kind of proud of that. If you look, I could jump in high school, and that back in high school, I could dunk, but you had to give me 10 tries. And oh, this one's horrible. Is another high school picture. That's me, number 43. That's back when I had hair. Bartholomew, number 45. Of the Dumbarton Spartan Juniors gets a handle on the ball during recent loss of boys basketball against Central Chiefs. Wasn't jumping as high back then. Uh, uh, Going forward, the further away you live from a major population, this is SRCX, and the further north, the better. No people, no problems. I think, a lot of people are going to be envious. Uh, Max likes the impression. Max, wow, contested layup, tough shot. How many points did I score that game? Wasn't that many. I usually got 20 plus. But in that game, I had 18, is what it says. Ozzy led Dumbarton with 18 points. We won that game 48-42, and I had 18 of our 48 points. Uh, Max saying, awesome to see the old photos. Yeah, Max saying, basketball invented by a Canadian, James Naismith, Dr. James Naismith, working at the YMCA. I think it was down in Wisconsin, Milwaukee area, where he was a Canadian employed by an American. I think it was the YMCA, but maybe I'm wrong. Uh, Heck of a game. Steve Nash is probably my favorite player ever, although Kawhi Leonard in his Toronto Raptors run is a close second. I really got heavy into basketball in 1977 when we moved to Portland, Oregon. That was the year the Portland Trailblazers won the NBA championship with Bill Walton, Maurice Lucas, Bill Twardzik, Bobby Gross, Lionel Hollins. They had an incredible team. Larry Steele, had an incredible team. Bobby Gross, an incredible team. And Bill Walton was an absolute beast. He was an absolute beast. Sadly, he kept his bad ankles, bad feet that just about ruined his career. But he did win 2 NBA titles with Portland in 1977, and then he won a second title with the Celtics, 84-85, in and around there. And they took a chance on him because he was all banged up, and even the coaches said, this guy shouldn't play. And Red Auerbach, the general manager, looked at the players or at the doctor's report and said, can you play, Bill? And he said, yeah, I can do it. Fine. He tore up the doctor's report. Great story. Anyway, I'm gonna leave you there. I'm gonna head out because like I say, I gotta be up in like 5, 6 hours. Um, yeah, and Max is, yeah, he just passed away recently. Uh, like I'm hearing actually there's a lot of stuff going on in my little circle. A lot of people, been a number of heart attacks. Just found out that an extended family member, 49, died of heart issues. And uh, found out about a guy, a woman came into my workplace and she was crying. And her 50-ish-year-old son had been fine, and then all of a sudden developed some stomach problems, went into the doctor, and he was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. He didn't even know it until he had a little stomach discomfort, went into the doctor, and he was dead within a month or so after first being diagnosed. He went straight to stage 4. Uh, and I'm glad you're enjoying the streams. Like I say, I'll end it off with my usual blessing. But before I do, welcome to anyone watching to the end. And if you haven't subscribed yet, please do. If you hit the bell, that will ensure that you are notified when I'm going live. If you don't hit the bell, then you won't get a notification. But if you do hit the bell, I mean, that's up to anyone, whether they want those notifications or not. And yeah. And Cryptomeria is saying condolences. Yeah, it stinks. Uh, anyway, I enjoy the stream. I enjoy you guys. As you guys are incredible. I learned things. I'm going to find out about Muhammad Gadat, or however you say his name, and his warnings or impressions or theories on artificial intelligence. I imagine it's doom and gloom. So may the Lord God, creator of all things, may he bless and may he keep you. May the Lord make his face to shine upon you. And again, may the Lord God, creator of all things, may he grant you peace. And we'll see what's coming. I mean, maybe all this worrying or concern over separation of Alberta and Quebec. Who knows? I mean, think about all the things that we were planning back in January, February of 2020. We were worrying, how are the Leafs going to do in the playoffs? The Raptors, defending champion, are they now without Kawhi Leonard? How are they going to fare in the playoffs? These are the things we were worried about. My family were going, well, should we get a dog? Or maybe we'll take a trip to Quebec City, Ottawa, and then Quebec City. What are we going to do? Everyone's making these little plans, and then, yeah, the deadly coronavirus is coming. The deadly coronavirus is coming. Everyone stay inside. And the world just stopped. And 90% of the population, right off the bat, there's probably, the number of people who were willing to question things right at the very beginning was incredibly small. 2 weeks. Well, it's just 2 weeks. Just 2 weeks to flatten the curve. I can give up 2 weeks. 2 weeks is no big deal. A month. Well, a month isn't too bad. 3 months. This is getting crazy. 6 months. Well, is it over yet? A year, 2 years. Yeah. Vaccine passport. Um, and SRCX claims to know what's coming. Well, there's probably a reason why you're up in the Yukon. Anyway, God bless, and we'll see you all in a night or two. Peace.